Through a strategy called back to back. What back to back means literally is that, another one is called sourcing. The person can just read on that. I know people have been on the stand, they're like, how can you be in the property without money, right? It takes time, right? So what happens is that you are selling your skills, you are selling your availability, you are selling your time to acquire property for someone else that has the assets to explore it, right? It's like in mining, you do prospective, it's much cheaper. So that 1,000 Rand actually can afford you an opportunity to own a property in Cape Town for a split second and actually make profit from it. So yes, there is Black Fridays on properties.
Thank you very much, Kalecho. Hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, then just let us know so we could ask a follow-up to it. But for those who have joined the space after we started, this is Amazing Stories, and today I'm sharing the mic with Nomza. I am really pleased, and we are pleased really to be chatting to Oslati Molatelo, who is the queen when it comes to property. She is very versed in, she's been in this business for a long time. So basically chatting all things property, or as much as we can cover over the next, around about an hour or so, probably a little bit less from now, when we hope to wrap things up. And we are just doing a bit of a Q&A with her now, and we will do that for probably a few more minutes. And then if you would want to request for the mic, and probably you have a question which has not been covered, you have something else that you need clarity on, you can request for the mic and we would allow you to come and engage with Molatelo, and then you could ask your question. But we still have a few more minutes where we will continue with the Q&A, and then the floor would be open to everyone who would want to interact. Once again, welcome to everyone, and it is Amazing Stories. Right, Molatelo, now the next question that I'm going to ask you is trying to kind of dial back to those who would want to first-time property owners. That is something that I know you are passionate about, because I've heard you speak about it a number of times, and obviously it also reflects on your time, on your profile. You have helped quite a few number of first-time owners to get that first property. And that is also a phase that is very tricky, because there have been quite a number of nasty or unpleasant stories and experiences that people have had going into that property for the very first time. What do you need to know? How do you juggle things with banks? Talking about the interest rates that you'd be given. Do you need to go to banks, or do you need to go to some other institutions that also offer funding or for buying your property? So I just want us to just talk a little bit about this. If you are buying property for the first time, from your experiences which you have had, what are some of the common mistakes that you have seen first-time property owners make, or you have helped them to avoid? What are some of those things that you think we can learn as lessons for those on the space who are considering dipping their feet into the property? It could be buying to live in or buying to rent, whatever it is, but first-time property owners, what are some of the lessons that you want to share with us from your experience?
Okay, cool. So this could take us forever, or it could be very short, because I have a very poor memory. But I'm just going to touch on what comes to my mind, right? I think what I always preach, and I think if people have been following on my page, is that your relationship with money, that's the first thing that you need to unpack, right? You do not buy a property and then consider your relationship with money, right? You do not go through and buy it and then start thinking about your credit record post that, right? your credit record is the first entry towards buying your home. It doesn't start the day that you start viewing houses and you start to establish whether you like the pink kitchen or the blue kitchen. That is important. But I think what's far more important is understanding your finances very well. And what I always preach, right, about understanding your finances, it does not necessarily mean that you need to become an accountant for you to do that. Use the tools that are given to us, right? Understand your budgets. I think it's called 22/7 app, right? Use that so that you can improve on your budgeting process, right? As soon as you improve on that, for instance, then go on, build relationships with bond originators. Bond originators are guys that literally are interested in helping you understand how much you can actually afford, at which term, what the repayments will be, and I think the interest rates as well, right? Go and sit down with them and say, guys, these are my finances, and be very honest about it. What do I mean by that? I always preach that just because your statement says that you've got 3 deductions, it doesn't necessarily mean that those are the only ones that are going to go off on your finances, on your budget, right? It's deeper than that. Have an honest conversation with them so that you can fully understand if you can really afford it, right? Tell them there are people that have been working in that industry forever, right? Make them understand what your financial stance is so that they give you a proper guideline, right? So they'll come back and give you a budget. As soon as they've given you a budget, go down and actually understand those repayments and start. I think it's called a bond repayment calculator. I think you can find it in Uber. I think the other one, it's Uber, or I forgot the other one, but Uber has a lot of calculators. But for now, focus on the bond repayment calculation, right? If you're taking a property of $500,000, go and understand at that interest rate how much you'll be paying. Right? What I preach is that if you're not in a hurry, for 12 months, just take off that amount of money that you would have been paying towards the house and put it in a savings account. So what does that allow you to do? It actually allows you to be 10 steps ahead of the bank, right? It gives you an opportunity to have a deposit, but greater than that, it gives you the capability to understand the impact of buying that house on your finances, right? Because then you are greater prepared for what is coming. Unlike people that say that, listen, I think this is how it's going to work out. As much as it's a budget, my personal finance journey has taught me that what we write on paper and what we experience are 2 different things, right? They are not the same. You can have a budget, but if you don't know how to actually sensitize yourself to it, then that's a different story altogether. So get used to the new way of budgeting. Become accustomed to that. Post that, what I preach as a first-time home buyer is allow yourself to explore your needs. Understand who you are so that your property can be in line with your lifestyle, as well as think about 5 years later from here, right? I'm a very young woman. I think I've shaped this a lot. I don't have any kids, right? So when I first bought this property that I stay in, I was like, listen, Molatelo is not buying a car anytime soon. I had a car and long story short, I was driving it for less than 1,000 kilos. I sold it. I was like, listen, I need a home whereby I have access to shops. I have access to transportation. I have access to this and that. At that point of my life, schools were not important, right? But I wanted to consider them because as young as I am, I felt, okay, 5 years from here, I could have children. So such things are important for you to start considering. Then you'll start looking at the aerial maps of places that you think you like, right? And their costs and their strains, right? And the crime rates in that area. And you'll be looking at the developments in those areas, then it will tell you if that place is for you. So already you know what you're budgeting, you know how to factor it into your finances, and you are well prepared off mentally because you know what you can afford, right? There's this friend of mine, she's got a pizzazz for life. She goes on to Sandton, knowing very well that she's buying a 1 million house, right? But she'll go to Sandton to look for houses. And I'd say, but what's the logic in that? There's absolutely nothing wrong with having that discussion with yourself, because that gives you the opportunity to dream well, to vision well, to set your goals. So that comes to the next one, right? Now you know your budget. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to max it out at all. Don't put yourself in a situation whereby you literally have to stay in that house even if you do not want to. It's okay if you can afford it. Listen, I'm excited for you, but have a plan. When you're a homeowner, I'm trying, through my page, I'm trying to open the minds of people to think like an investor. Have a strategy. How long can you stay there? If you can afford 500,000 and you can find a house for, let's say, 100,000, I know it's not easy or it's not possible. This is an example, so take it as that, right? Take the house of 100,000 and actually pay it off in the next coming 3 years. I mean, that is equity. You're building yourself a portfolio with not so much effort to it, without the strain of having to own a house for 20 years. Remember with banks, as much as they are friends, they're in business. The longer you own debt, the more you pay. And the more you take, the far more interest there will be towards the debt. So I want you to think in a manner that is plenary, that is comfortable, in understanding that your first home is not always necessarily your last home. Zing, I don't want to go on and talk a lot. I think I'm just highlighting the first initial. Explain what you're signing for, and people must alert you, because this is a lot of money you're signing alone. You're signing away your time, your 8 to 5, like almost 30% of your income will go towards this, which means 30% of 24 hours will go to someone else for your staying. So someone must let you understand what you're signing off.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Thanks. That's like a mouthful, and we would unpack that in a bit. But one thing I just want to do, obviously, is to touch on a few other things so that we kind of just brush, and then we can, with time, sort of dig them up again here and there. So I would ask you one more question, and hopefully, Nomza would also have another one. Then we would open the space for those who would want to interact, to ask you more questions, to request for the mic, and while we might be waiting for those, then we could now start coming back to do some of the deeper digging with some of these questions. So the one that I would ask you just now is flipping. So when we talk about flipping properties, okay, let me just express a bit of my ignorance here. When I talk about flipping, there are two things that come to my mind. When I used to play soccer, when I score a goal and I run and I skip into the air and I turn 1,000,000 times, that type of flipping, or flip-flops. And when the very moment I started hearing of flipping properties, that was the first thing that came to my mind. Then, now I did some digging, and then I fell in love with the TV channel, which definitely talks about flipping properties, and that really caught my attention. So every day, essentially, most of my TV time that I spend, I usually watch that channel when it talks about flipping properties, and it's really very exciting, such that I almost every time sit down and I think my house is a project in in process type thing, always want to change something, always want to flip this or flip that. But now let's try to give people who are like me still very ignorant about what flipping property is. So I would want you to tell us what is flipping property and what does it really entail? What are those investment opportunities in flipping that listeners on this space should be interested in to dig in and do their research. Obviously, we cannot exhaust that because it's really deep, but so that just brushing the tops to kind of whet their appetites and send them researching to find out what they should and why they should be in.
Paint. And they're like, listen, the property has improved in value and voila, we are selling it at a higher cost and we are happy. Right? So let me break it down a bit. Flipping can literally mean that you are improving the value of a property because it's distressed. Distressed means it's in a bad condition, right? That's what we are accustomed to when people say, I am flipping a property. That is what most people would refer to, right? Another way of flipping property is not necessarily that you're buying the property in a bad state. It means someone is in such a bad financial condition, they just want to get rid of their property. And you are there. You've got the resources to deal with their problems, to take on their problems. You buy